On the evening of 22 February 1965, in a fourth-floor apartment at 16, Sharia Ismail Mohammed, in Zamalek, Cairo. The sound is ordinary, a tap running in the bathroom, traffic over the bridge. A metal bathroom scale nudged back under the sink. Outside, Sudanese gatekeepers stand at the entrance, part of the modest security around the building in this affluent Nile Island district. Within days, Egyptian state media will release an official pool photograph, a pale, rusty-haired man named Wolfgang Lotz, demonstrating how a radio transmitter fits inside those same bathroom scales. The image circulated worldwide as proof of a spy unmasked. At this moment, though, it is still a domestic object on a cool tile floor. The arrest team is already climbing the stairs. The scale is still just a scale, for a few more seconds, in a city where almost everyone believes the man who owns it is a German ex-officer, horse breeder, and generous host. In 1959, in Munich, a tall, blond man in his late 30s begins the slow work of becoming someone else. Officially, he is Wolfgang Lotz, a former Wehrmacht captain who fought with Rommel in North Africa, a one-time Nazi party member who made a fortune breeding horses in Australia before drifting back to West Germany. That is the legend designed for him by Israeli military intelligence, which has decided that a German cover will open doors in Cairo that no Israeli passport ever could. The real biography: birth in Mannheim in 1921 to a Jewish mother, escape to Mandate Palestine in 1933, service in the British Army in Egypt, later, as an Israeli officer, stays in sealed files in Tel Aviv. The new one is rehearsed in rented rooms and cafes in Munich and Bonn. He practices war stories culled from German POW interrogations he once conducted in British uniform. The details are accurate. Only the protagonist has changed. Intelligence training reports from this period describe the effort to construct a convincing former Nazi whose language, mannerisms, and silences could withstand close scrutiny from real veterans. The human cost hides behind logistics. His Israeli wife Rivka and their son Oded remain in Israel, soon to be relocated quietly to Paris for safety. The man they know begins to thin out into cover stories and delayed letters. By the end of 1959, the legend is convincing enough that West Germans, and later Egyptians, will accept it at face value. The file in Tel Aviv notes the success in neutral terms. For his family, it is the year their real husband and father starts to become a rumor in his own life. While reports accumulate in Israeli offices, he books a one-way ticket south, toward a city where ex-Nazis and new rockets are beginning to converge. In early 1960, on the Nile Island district of Zamalek in Cairo, Lotz signs a lease for a spacious apartment at 16. Sharia Ismail Mohammed, a wealthy suburb address that appears in later intelligence histories. A few minutes away, on the neighboring island of Gezira, lies the fashionable Cavalry Club, a natural social hub for a man whose cover rests on horses and money. In Giza, within sight of the pyramids, he rents stables and buildings for what will soon be introduced as an exclusive riding school. The domestic setup is part of the operation. Sudanese gatekeepers at the Zamalek building provide a veneer of respectable security. Inside, the apartment must look like that of any well-off European expatriate. Furniture, records, a well-stocked drinks cabinet, and the small objects that will matter later. A widely read magazine article would later describe how Egyptian generals and cabinet members in the early 1960s knew Lotz as a wealthy German horse breeder with an engaging habit of sending champagne and other lavish gifts to well-placed friends. The nickname Champagne Spy emerges from Mossad accountants reviewing expenses, large quantities of wine and champagne charged to operational funds. The riding school in Giza offers what Israeli planners envisioned: access to Egyptian officers, politicians, and influential Germans who come to ride, watch races, and talk. For now, it is all still cover: an address in Zamalek, rented stables in Giza, and a bathroom scale that has not yet been opened and modified. The legend begins to feel real because everyone around him treats it as such. As the first invitations go out for riding lessons and drinks, only a few people in Tel Aviv know that the most important piece of equipment in this new life has not yet arrived. In June 1961, in a hotel near the Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris, Lotz meets with his operators, by now transferred from military intelligence to Mossad, who arrive with cash and a new communications device, a small transponder for sending coded radio messages from Cairo. His Israeli wife Rivka and their son Oded are housed in Paris for the duration of his mission, an arrangement described in memoirs and documentary interviews as a compromise between operational security and family life. On paper, he receives instructions for operating the transponder, schedules for transmission windows, and protocols for dead drops if radio fails. In human terms, he takes his son for walks and repeatedly insists that his absences are for government work, expecting obedience rather than understanding. Later testimony from Oded underscores the psychological weight of this secrecy imposed on a child. On the train from Paris back to Munich, Lotz meets a German woman, Waltraud Neumann. According to multiple accounts, including his own autobiography, he decides without consulting Mossad to marry her, despite being already married. The civil marriage takes place in Munich. His superiors briefly consider recalling him, but ultimately allow the mission to continue, judging that an authentic German wife may even strengthen his cover. Waltraud is told he works for NATO, and over time, begins to assist him, still unaware of his full identity. In the operational history, this is another logistical complication. Psychologically, it is the moment his double life splits again. One wife and child in Paris, another wife preparing to move to Cairo. When Waltraud follows him to Zamalek later that year, the bathroom scale waiting in their new apartment will be one of the few objects in the house whose purpose she does not understand. By July 1962, President Gamal Abdel Nasser is able to parade new Egyptian rockets, El Kahir and El Safir, before the international press, missiles designed with the help of German scientists who once worked in the Nazi weapons program. Western and Israeli reporting begins to focus on Factory 333, a military rocket center outside Cairo connected to this effort. Mossad's earlier Operation Damocles letter bombs, intimidation, and diplomatic pressure aimed at driving those German scientists out of Egypt had already cost Egyptian and German lives and contributed to the political downfall of Mossad chief Isser Harel. By the time Lotz is fully established in Cairo, open violence is officially scaled back, but the fear that German engineers could help Nasser develop missiles capable of hitting Tel Aviv remains one of the central motives in his file. By late 1961, in the country clubs and salons of Cairo, Lotz has become a familiar figure. The charming German horse breeder, a man with money, stories from North Africa, and an easy manner. Accounts of expatriate life in the city describe soirees at the home of Johann von Leers, former Nazi propagandist turned Egyptian advisor, where one could see ex-SS doctor Hans Eisel and others singing old songs from the Third Reich. Lotz was present in these circles, listening more than he spoke. Press descriptions from the period report that Egyptian generals and cabinet members believed him to be a wealthy horse breeder and former Africa Corps officer with ties to Egyptian intelligence. The rumor that he might even have served in the SS worked in his favor. Nothing in his fluent German or uncircumcised body suggested any connection to Israel. In these rooms, the target is not a single person but a network. German engineers linked to Egypt's missile program, Egyptian officers overseeing rocket development, intermediaries arranging procurement. Lotz collects fragments from each encounter. Job titles, factory names, mentions of desert sites. He files them away for future reports. Later, intelligence histories credit him with confirming the locations and operational status of Egyptian missile facilities, including desert test sites and assembly plants, while carefully noting that some details came from other sources as well. The human consequence is already visible in the casualness with which men at these parties talk about ranges, warheads, and possible targets. For them, Israel is a problem to be solved technically. For Lotz, each sentence becomes another line in a report that will shape how his own country prepares for war. Back in Zamalek, when he steps on the bathroom scale after another evening of wine and rocket talk, the weight he is measuring has less to do with kilograms than with what his reports will eventually authorize others to do. In 1962, while Cairo's newspapers celebrate the July rocket tests, radio operators in Israel sift through bursts of coded traffic from abroad. Among them are transmissions from the transponder placed in Lotz's hands in Paris the previous year, now operating out of Cairo. Intelligence summaries state that his messages included lists of names and addresses of German scientists working in Egypt, descriptions of their roles, and references to sites associated with missile assembly and testing. One later account describes him compiling a comprehensive list of German scientists and their addresses, material that dovetailed with information supplied by other sources, including a former Nazi officer turned Mossad asset. Technically, each transmission is a small miracle of timing. The right frequency, the right window, the right cover noises in the apartment. Egyptian and Soviet radio direction equipment is not yet focused on him. Their main triumph in that field, tracing Eli Cohen's wireless in Damascus, will come later. For Lotz, the domestic choreography is simple but exact. Close door, set bathroom scale, connect concealed transmitter, speak in code, disconnect, slide the scale back to its place. Each successful burst of traffic deepens his value to his service and, by extension, the risk he is carrying. On paper, the consequence is evident in the growing thickness of his file. In his apartment, the consequence is the quiet shift from pretending to be a German speaking for Germans to actually shaping how Israelis understand the intentions of the men he drinks with. As the year ends, the same device that carries coordinates and names will soon carry something else, an escalation he does not fully clear with his superiors. Between 1963 and early 1964, the atmosphere around the German scientists hardens. Operation Damocles has already sent letter bombs and threats to several targets in Europe and Egypt, prompting arrests in Switzerland and political fallout that contribute to Isser Harel's resignation as Mossad chief. Yet not all pressure ceases. Some intimidation efforts continue under Mayor Amit's leadership, sometimes involving other agents, sometimes relying on information fed by Lotz from Cairo. Most historians emphasize that Lotz's main mission remains intelligence collection and target acquisition, not assassination. From his vantage point in Zamalek and Giza, he observes which German engineers are still in Egypt, which families have quietly left, and how Egyptian security responds to earlier bombings at offices associated with figures such as rocket designer Wolfgang Pils. Several journalistic and scholarly reconstructions assert that Lotz begins without fully informing his handlers to send his own letter bombs to some of the scientists or their circles, convinced that stronger pressure is needed to drive them out. Egyptian official statements later claim that he obtained explosives hidden in soap and letters intended for German scientists, a detail repeated in intelligence history summaries. Here the psychological line blurs. The Playboy horse breeder who listens and reports begins to think of himself as an active shaper of events, not merely an observer. Each small parcel he sends from a Cairo post office is a personal decision layered atop an official mission. The human consequences, including Egyptian civilian casualties, will be counted by people who have never heard his name. By September 1964, one of those parcels will explode before it ever reaches a German scientist, and the shockwave will start to echo back toward his apartment. In a Cairo post office that month, a parcel addressed in German never reaches its intended recipient. Egyptian authorities later state that a letter bomb linked to Lotz detonated there, killing or injuring Egyptian civilians rather than the German target, and drawing the attention of Egypt's counterintelligence services to a new, hidden actor inside their own capital. This incident is part of a wider pattern. Reporting on the campaign against German scientists notes letter bombs that maimed Wolfgang Pils's secretary at a rocket facility and killed Egyptian workers connected to the missile project. In this context, Lotz's actions are one strand in a broader campaign. Parcels that carry not just explosives, but a message that collaboration with Nasser's program carries personal risk. The distinction between which bombs can be traced to him and which to other mechanisms remains blurred in public sources, and careful historians avoid over-attribution. Inside his apartment in Zamalek, the ritual with the bathroom scale continues. The device now carries both intelligence and, indirectly, the consequences of violent pressure. Analysts in Israel receive reports of shaken German morale, increased security at missile facilities, and, eventually, a slow trickle of resignations and departures by some key experts. The human impact is double. Egyptians bury their dead. German families reassess contracts and futures. Lotz lives in a city whose security services are now searching for the origin of the bombs. The circle is tightening, even if his own name has not yet surfaced in any Egyptian memo. By early 1965, after Eli Cohen's wireless is traced in Damascus, the same Soviet-supplied technology will begin listening for signals much closer to the Nile. In January 1965, in Damascus, Syrian security services arrest Eli Cohen, the Israeli agent who had infiltrated Syria's political and military elite. His wireless transmissions, traced by Soviet-supplied radio direction equipment, lead directly to his apartment. News of the capture travels quickly through Arab intelligence channels. In Cairo, Egyptian authorities take note not only of what was found in Damascus, but how. According to published histories of the case, Egyptian authorities acquire comparable radio direction technology from the Soviet Union and begin scanning for clandestine transmissions in their own capital. Among the signals they lock onto are those coming from Zamalek. Over several days in February 1965, direction-finding teams triangulate the origin of the coded bursts to the building at 16 Sharia Ismail Mohammed. Inside the apartment, the routine has not changed. Lotz still times his transmissions to minimize suspicion, still uses the modified bathroom scale described in his 1972 memoir, and shown in later official Egyptian photographs to conceal the transmitter. Waltraud knows there is secret work, but has been told it is for NATO. In public accounts, she is portrayed as supportive, but not fully informed, a participant in the cover rather than the deeper reality. For intelligence officers in Tel Aviv, the situation looks normal. Reports continue to arrive, confirming that Egyptian preparations for future conflict are intensifying. For Egyptian technicians listening to the airwaves, the same transmissions are now coordinates on a map. On 22 February 1965, the paths of those technicians and the man with the bathroom scale will finally intersect at the Zamalek stairwell. On that evening, the precise hour is not recorded in public sources. Egyptian security officers enter the building at 16 Sharia Ismail Mohammed. They have warrants, armed escorts, and, crucially, direction-finding logs indicating that clandestine transmissions have originated from one of the upper floors. Later, Egyptian communiques will describe the target as a German-Israeli spy. But at this moment, they still think they are coming for a German traitor. Accounts compiled from Lotz's memoir and subsequent histories agree on the essentials. He and Waltraud are arrested at home. Investigators quickly locate a hidden transmission set inside a bathroom scale, and coded messages already intercepted are linked to his equipment. An official government photograph dated early March 1965 shows Lotz demonstrating to Egyptian authorities how the transmitter was concealed in the scale, a visual that would be reproduced in newspapers and archives around the world. Initially, Lotz denies espionage, sticking to his German persona. Faced with the physical evidence of the transmitter and the message logs, he confesses to spying but frames it as a financial arrangement. A German who agreed to work for Israel in return for funds to set up his riding club. Crucially, Egyptian interrogators accept this version. They do not realize he is an Israeli citizen, a misunderstanding that later Israeli accounts argue helped save him from execution. The human cost begins immediately: interrogation and torture for further information, and the collapse of the glamorous life that had protected his cover. For Waltraud, who is arrested alongside him, the discovery that the man she married is neither who he claimed to be nor who she thought he was adds another layer of betrayal to the legal charges. 2 weeks later, when Egyptian authorities stage a demonstration of the bathroom scale transmitter for photographers, The object that once blended into the tiles becomes a public exhibit of deception. By March 1965, Egyptian authorities publicly revealed details of the arrest, describing Lotz and Waltraud as German spies working for Israel, and emphasizing the discovery of explosives in soap and letter bombs intended for German scientists. Coverage in Israeli and international outlets underscores two narratives: Egyptian anger at foreign interference and the spectacle of a supposed ex-Nazi now in the dock for working with Israel. Internationally, West Germany becomes involved. According to multiple accounts, Mossad ensures that Lotz is represented by a German lawyer and that a German observer attends the trial, reinforcing the fiction that he is a West German national whose actions, while reprehensible, are not ideological treason against his own people. This diplomatic framing matters. It helps limit the likelihood of a death sentence. In August 1965, the Cairo High Court sentences Lotz to life imprisonment for espionage and Waltraud to 3 years in prison. Documentary footage and stills from the period show them sitting together on the defendant's bench. Hand in hand, a visual used decades later in the film, The Champagne Spy, to illustrate the cost borne by those around him. For Egyptian officials, the verdict is a demonstration of state, strength, and vigilance. For Mossad, it is a mixed outcome. A valuable source lost, but his life spared. For his families, Rivka and Oded in Israel, Waltraud in Cairo, it marks the formalization of an absence that will define the rest of their lives. 3 years later, after a different war redraws maps and prisoner lists, the man who once stepped onto a doctored bathroom scale in Zamalek will step onto a different kind of exchange platform. From late 1965 to 1968, Lotz serves his life sentence in Egyptian custody. Publicly available sources give only broad strokes. He is imprisoned, interrogated, and according to Israeli accounts, tortured for additional intelligence. Details of his daily conditions remain largely absent from the record. There are no reliable transcripts of his inner thoughts, only later reflections filtered through memoir and interviews. Outside the prison walls, the strategic landscape shifts. In June 1967, the Six-Day War erupts. Israel's swift victory over Egyptian, Syrian, and Jordanian forces dramatically alters the military balance and produces thousands of Egyptian prisoners of war. Within a year, negotiations for prisoner exchanges begin. Lotz, whose intelligence reporting is widely credited in Israel with contributing to the understanding of Egyptian capabilities before the war, becomes one name on the Israeli side of the ledger. In 1968, as part of an exchange involving 9 Israeli agents for more than 4,000 Egyptian prisoners, Lotz and Waltraud are released and returned to Israel. For the Israeli public, news reports frame his return as a story of courage and sacrifice. The Champagne Spy who risked his life in Cairo's salons. For his first family, the event reopens old wounds around abandonment and divided loyalties. Oded, then a young man, will later describe the emotional complexity of meeting the father, whose double life had shaped his childhood. Once again, the human cost is measured in relationships. A man welcomed as a hero by some, regarded with pain and ambivalence by those who had to live with the consequences of his choices. Back in Israel, as he begins to write his memoirs, the very object that exposed him, the bathroom scale with a radio inside, will become a story device rather than a security risk. By November 1970, a widely read weekly magazine publishes an article titled The Champagne Spy, introducing international readers to the story of the German horse breeder in Cairo, who turned out to be an Israeli agent. The piece emphasizes his gifts of champagne to Egyptian generals and his explanation for cooperating with Israel that they had threatened to reveal his Nazi past to Bonn authorities, while noting the detail that he was uncircumcised, a factor that had helped sustain his cover. In 1972, Lotz publishes his own memoir, The Champagne Spy. Israel's master spy tells his story, offering his version of events: the building of the German legend, the years in Cairo, the bathroom scale transmitter, and his capture. The book becomes a key archival source for later historians, even as they treat some of its self-presentations with caution. Parallel accounts from intelligence histories complicate the myth. Some veterans describe him as shy and closed rather than flamboyant, suggesting that the Playboy element belonged more to the cover than the man. Others note that he immersed himself in the role so successfully that he adopted his new spying persona as himself, blurring the line between legend and identity. For his family, the memoir's publication is a second exposure. Decades later, his son Oded participates in the documentary The Champagne Spy, confronting on camera the years of secrecy and emotional distance. The bathroom scale, the parties, the riding club. These are no longer just operational details. They are the furniture of a childhood lived beside, but never inside, his father's other life. In the decades that follow, as Lotz moves to Munich and attempts a quieter existence, the images that survive of him will be archival fragments, none more enduring than that official photo of a man and a bathroom scale. In the 1980s, Lotz relocates to Munich, where he works in the sports department of the Kaufhof department store, a far cry from the riding clubs and Zamalek salons. He undertakes occasional media and advisory roles connected to his past, including missions during the 1982 Lebanon War to help guide foreign journalists. But his operational days are over. His health, damaged by imprisonment, deteriorates. When he dies in Munich on the 13th of May, 1993 from heart disease, obituaries in international newspapers recall him primarily as the Champagne Spy, the Israeli agent who posed as an ex-Nazi horse trainer and playboy to infiltrate Egypt's elite. He is buried in Israel with military honors, closing a circle that began in Mannheim and passed through Tel Aviv, Cairo, and back to Europe. In 2007, the documentary The Champagne Spy brings his story to a new audience, using 8mm and 16mm family footage, trial clips from Cairo, and interviews with Oded and former Mossad officers. Viewers see the now famous images again: the Cairo courtroom, the couple on the defendant's bench, and the demonstration of the bathroom scale transmitter, an object once kept on a bathroom floor now frozen as an exhibit in intelligence history. The moral balance remains ambiguous. To some Israelis, he is a hero whose information helped prepare the ground for the Six-Day War. To others, including members of his own family, he represents the human cost of a life lived inside lies glamour and sacrifice, inseparable from betrayal and absence. Years later, in a quiet archive reading room, someone scrolling through digitized images pauses on a frame from early March 1965. The caption is simple. A German named Wolfgang Lotz demonstrates how a radio transmitter was hidden inside a bathroom scale. The photograph contains no rockets, no generals, no parades, only a man, an object from a Zamalek bathroom, and the hands that once moved it casually across cold tile. The scale no longer measures weight, only the distance between the life he lived in those rooms and the operation that required him to vanish. The image flickers on the screen for a moment, and then is replaced by the next document. But the small, domestic rectangle of metal and plastic lingers in the mind, a quiet reminder that, in this story, the most dangerous device in Cairo was something everyone stepped on without looking twice.